There is a story that has been passed down in one family for over 50 years. Not publicly, not in any interview, not in any book about Bruce Lee, just inside one family, from a father to his children, from those children to their children. A story about a Tuesday afternoon in 1972 in a parking lot in Los Angeles. A father and his 8-year-old son had just spotted Bruce Lee coming out of a grocery store. The boy was obsessed with Bruce Lee the way only an 8-year-old boy can be obsessed with someone. Completely irrationally, with his whole heart. He ran up to Bruce Lee with a scrap of paper and a pen. Bruce Lee looked down at the boy, and he said no. He said it gently, kindly, without coldness or arrogance. But clearly, no. The father took a step forward, ready to apologize, ready to pull his son away, ready to make the embarrassing moment end as quickly as possible. And then Bruce Lee did something so unexpected, so far outside of anything the father had anticipated, that the father stood in a parking lot on a Tuesday afternoon and cried. Not sad tears. The other kind. The kind that come when a human being does something so precisely right that your body does not know how else to respond. The father told that story for the rest of his life. And every time he told it, he ended it the same way. He said, "That man understood something about children that most adults never figure out." This is that story. Before I tell you what Bruce Lee did, I need to tell you who this father was. Because the father matters to this story. His name was Harold. Not a famous name. Not a name that appears in any record of Bruce Lee's life. Just Harold. A 34-year-old man living in a working-class neighborhood in Los Angeles in 1972. He worked at a machine shop. He had worked there for 11 years. He came home at 5:30 every evening with grease under his fingernails that never quite came fully clean no matter how hard he scrubbed. He had 3 children. The boy, whose name was Danny, was the middle one. 8 years old. Small for his age. Quiet in the way that small, quiet boys are quiet. Not because they have nothing to say, but because the world has not yet given them a safe place to say it. Danny had been having a difficult year. There had been trouble at school. Not academic, social. The particular cruelty that small, quiet boys absorb day after day until being powerless starts to feel like just who you are rather than something being done to you. Harold could see it in the way Danny moved through the house. Carefully, shoulders slightly hunched, like someone who had learned to take up as little space as possible. But Danny would not talk about it. The only thing that lifted him, the only thing that seemed to pull him out of himself, was Bruce Lee. He had seen the Green Hornet on television. While everyone else watched and moved on, Danny stayed. He watched it again and again. He drew pictures of Kato. He practiced the movements in the backyard with the focus of a child who has found the thing that makes the noise in his head go quiet. Harold had seen his son look at Bruce Lee on a television screen the way he wished his son would look at himself. Like someone powerful. Like someone who could not be pushed around. Like someone who was enough. The grocery store was not far from their neighborhood. Harold had brought Danny on an errand. A Saturday afternoon, or maybe a Tuesday, Harold could never quite remember, and they were crossing the parking lot when Danny grabbed his father's hand and froze. Bruce Lee was walking out of the grocery store. Alone. 2 paper bags. Ordinary clothes. Not looking to be noticed. Harold had a fraction of a second to react. Danny was already moving. He pulled free and ran toward Bruce Lee, reaching into his jacket pocket for a folded piece of paper and a short pencil he apparently always kept there. Because you never knew. He reached Bruce Lee and stopped directly in front of him. Out of breath. Looking up, he held out the paper and pencil with both hands. He said, "Please, just that word. Please, if you love Bruce Lee stories, subscribe. I post rare stories every day." Bruce Lee stopped walking. He looked down at Danny. He looked at the paper. He looked at the pencil. He looked at the boy's face. Out of breath, eyes wide, holding everything he had out in both hands the way only a child can hold something out, with zero protection, with nothing held back. And he said no. Harold was right behind his son now. He heard it. He saw the word form on Bruce Lee's lips before the sound arrived. That half-second of watching his son be told no by the person he admired most in the world. He reached for Danny's shoulder, an apology already forming in his mouth. But Bruce Lee was already setting his grocery bags down on the ground. He set them down carefully. He straightened up. He looked at Danny and he said something that Harold would repeat for the rest of his life. He said, "I am not going to sign your paper." He paused. He said, "Because I want to show you something better." Danny did not move. He was still holding the paper and the pencil, still out of breath, not sure yet whether this was good news or bad news. 8 years old and his entire body suspended in the question of what comes next. Bruce Lee crouched down, not leaned down, crouched, all the way down, so that he was at eye level with Danny, so that Danny did not have to look up at him. He said, "What is your name?" Danny told him. Bruce Lee said, "Danny. Good name. Strong name." He said, "Can I see your hands?" Danny looked at his father. Harold nodded slightly. Danny put the paper and pencil in his jacket pocket and held out his hands. Bruce Lee looked at them seriously, the way a craftsman looks at material, turning them over gently, looking at the palms, looking at the size of them. He said, "These are good hands. You know that?" Danny shook his head slowly. Bruce Lee said, "I know hands. I have studied hands for a long time, and these are good hands." He held his own hands out next to Danny's. He said, "Do you see?" Danny looked at the two pairs of hands side by side. His small ones and Bruce Lee's, calloused, trained, the hands that had been written about in newspapers and filmed for television and studied by martial artists around the world. Bruce Lee said, "Mine were like yours once. Small, uncertain, not sure yet what they could do." He looked at Danny very directly. He said, "They found out." Harold was watching all of this from 2 steps behind his son. He had stopped moving, just standing there, watching Bruce Lee crouch in front of his 8-year-old son and talk to him the way almost no adult in Danny's life had ever talked to him. As if what Danny thought and felt and held in his small hands mattered. As if there was nowhere else in the world Bruce Lee needed to be right now. Because there was nowhere else Bruce Lee needed to be right now. Harold had seen famous people before. He understood what that kind of attention usually looked like. The smile that does not reach the eyes, the nod that does not indicate listening, the presence already halfway somewhere else. Bruce Lee was not halfway somewhere else. He was entirely here, in a parking lot, with a kid. Bruce Lee asked Danny if he had ever tried martial arts. Danny shook his head. Bruce Lee said, "Would you like me to show you one thing? Just one. You can do it right here." Danny looked at his father again. Harold nodded. Danny said yes. Bruce Lee stood up. He showed Danny how to stand. Not a fighting stance. Just a stance. Feet shoulder-width apart. Weight even. Spine straight. Chin level. He said, "This is how you stand when you want the world to know you are not going anywhere." He adjusted Danny's feet slightly. He pressed 2 fingers gently against Danny's sternum, the center of his chest, and said, "From here. Everything comes from here. Not from your arms. Not from your size. From here." Danny straightened up. And Harold, watching his son straighten up, felt something happen in his chest that he was not prepared for. Because Danny looked different. Not dramatically. Not like something out of a movie. No music swelling. No visible transformation. Just a small boy standing in a parking lot with his feet shoulder-width apart and his spine straight and his chin level. But the shoulders were not hunched. The shoulders, those small shoulders that had been curling inward for months, absorbing the daily weight of being small and not enough and invisible, were back. Just slightly. Just enough. Bruce Lee showed Danny one more thing. A simple strike. Not a punch. He was very specific about this. He said, "This is not for fighting. This is for knowing. For knowing what your body can do when you decide to let it." He showed the movement slowly. Once. Twice. Then he guided Danny through it, holding his arm lightly, correcting the angle, explaining where the power came from and why. Danny did it. And it landed. Not on anything. In the air. Practice strike. But it landed the way a first step lands, with the specific, irreplaceable feeling of something that has been waiting inside you that has finally been allowed out. Bruce Lee watched it and said, yes. Just that. Yes. Not good job or well done or any of the automatic praise adults give children. Just yes. The word that means you have done the exact thing you were supposed to do and the person watching knows it and is not pretending. Danny looked at his hands. The same hands he had been looking at 30 seconds ago. They looked the same. But something about the way he looked at them was different. If you love Bruce Lee stories, subscribe. I post rare stories every day. Bruce Lee picked up his grocery bags. He looked at Danny one more time and said, remember, not for fighting, for knowing. There is a difference. Danny nodded. Bruce Lee looked at Harold. Just for a moment. Just a glance. One adult to another. And Harold, in that glance, understood that Bruce Lee had seen exactly what was happening. Had seen the hunched shoulders, had seen the careful way Danny moved through the world, had read the situation in the fraction of a second it takes a man who has learned to read people to read them, had decided in that same fraction of a second that an autograph was not what this child needed. Harold could not speak. He tried. He managed. Thank you. Bruce Lee nodded once. He picked up his bags and walked to his car and drove away. Harold stood in the parking lot. And then the tears came. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly, the way some things overflow when they have been held too tightly for too long. Danny noticed. He looked up at his father with the alarm that children feel when adults cry unexpectedly. He said, Dad? Harold looked down at his son. At the small shoulders that were still slightly, just slightly further back than they had been 20 minutes ago. He said, I am okay. I am really okay. He put his hand on the back of his son's neck. That particular hold that fathers have, warm and firm and saying everything that words cannot manage, and they walked to the car together. Danny took martial arts classes for the next 4 years. Not because he became a fighter. He never competed. But he trained consistently, with the focus of a child who has been shown that his body contains something worth developing. The bullying did not stop immediately. These things don't work that way in real life. But something changed in how Danny navigated it. Not because he could fight back, he never fought anyone. Because the posture changed. The way he entered a room. The slight shift in how he held himself that Bruce Lee had unlocked in 20 minutes carried forward into every hallway and playground. Small, quiet boys who stand with their spine straight and their chin level take up more space than their size suggests. People feel that. Harold watched it happen over months. The slow return of something he had been afraid he was losing. He never forgot what caused it. Bruce Lee died 14 months after that afternoon. Harold heard the news on the radio driving to work. 6 in the morning. He pulled the car to the side of the road. He sat there for a while. He thought about the grocery bags set carefully on the asphalt. The crouch all the way down to eye level. The phrase he had turned over in his mind so many times the edges had gone smooth. Mine were like yours once. Small. Uncertain. Not sure yet what they could do. He thought about a man who was 31 years old. Already famous, already stretched thin. Looking at an 8-year-old boy and deciding he was worth 20 minutes. Harold wiped his face. Started the car. Drove to work. That evening he told his children the story. He told it the way people tell stories that matter, again and again to anyone who would listen over years and decades. Until the story became the monument. Bruce Lee could have signed the autograph. 10 seconds. The boy would have been thrilled. Harold would have thanked him. Pleasant memory and nothing more. But Bruce Lee looked at that child and understood something. A signature on a piece of paper says, I exist and you were near me once. What he gave Danny instead said something completely different. It said, you exist. And what exists inside you is worth 20 minutes of the most famous martial artist in the world crouching on parking lot asphalt to show you where your power lives. That is the difference between a celebrity and a person. Celebrities give you proof that they are real. People give you proof that you are. Bruce Lee had every reason to sign the paper and keep walking. He chose the 20 minutes instead. And 50 years later, a family still tells the story. Because some things outlast everything else. Long after the films have aged. Long after the records have been broken. Long after the world has moved on to other legends. The 20 minutes in the parking lot. The hands held next to the small hands. Mine were like yours once. They found out.